at that moment. And Brenda screamed at me and at my grandmother and said, "Get her out of here! Get her out of here!" Because I asked if we could keep him.
Did she ever tell you why she wasn't going to keep him?
Well, she had an addiction. That's one of the reasons. She always put that first before me or him or Zach or anybody. What was the question again?
I just asked if she told you why she wasn't keeping him.
Yeah. It was, you know, for him to have a better life, for him to take a different path.
How was Brenda as a mother to you?
Brenda was a mother to me. That's what you said?
I asked how she was. How was she as a mother to you?
Yeah. Horrible.
Poor. How did having Brenda as a mother affect your life?
How did it affect my life? In many ways. In many ways. She just introduced me to a life that no child should ever be introduced to. And, you know, she has no regards, you know, for my life or his life, you know. So.
Ms. Willard, have you ever been convicted of a felony?
Yes.
Sorry, Ms. Curtis, would you mind speaking up?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Have you ever been convicted of a felony?
Yes.
How many times?
16.
Have you ever been to prison?
Yes.
Did you go back to that apartment after Nikolas was born?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. And how long did you stay there?
I stayed there. It didn't last long. Didn't last long.
Why did you move out?
I started going to school, and I was trying to have a life, I guess, start a life in a way up here, but I don't know.
Were you forced to move out of the apartment?
Yeah, I came back from school one day, and there was an eviction notice on the door, and it said you have a certain amount of time to leave. Then I came back a week later, I think, whenever. The eviction notice stayed on the door for a while, for a minute. I came back one day from school, and all my belongings were on the front yard. I couldn't find my cat. And Brenda was waiting for me like she always is when I get back from school. And she's like, come on, pick up all this stuff, put it in your grandma's car. At this time, my grandma had already left. The abuse had got really bad. She left me, but, you know. So then I helped Brenda pick up all my stuff from the front yard, the front lawn.
Where did you go?
We went to some crack house, I guess, and I would not get down. And that night, we ended up sleeping in the car. And the next day, we went to a friend's house of hers, and the lady she had a house. It was all right. She was like acting really crazy in the house, and Brenda was sitting. We had put all our stuff inside, some of our things, and Brenda was sitting at the table when we were finished unloading a few things. She sat at the table, and I sat across from her, and she smoked crack. She took out a pipe and she lit it. She was about to light it, and she was like, "You're not gonna turn your head?" And I said, "For what? You're still gonna smoke that shit." And she cocked back her hand and slapped me. I got up. I didn't cry. I went and sat on the porch, and I made up my mind that I was gonna run away. And the next day we went to a women's in distress shelter. She came up with some story about how her boyfriend beat her up, and she didn't have nowhere to go, so we stayed there. And that night, when she went to sleep, I packed my book bag, and the next morning I went to school, and I ran away.
Where did you go?
I went to this house that wasn't far from where we were living, by Las Olas. And these people, their name were Patty and Buster. My friend, one of the girls who lived in the efficiency complex, she introduced me to them. They were cool people. And I stayed there. I went there.
Okay, how long after that was it before you saw Brenda again?
I saw Brenda a few days later. She came knocking. I don't know how she found out where I was. She came knocking on the door of that little green and white house. It's still there. And she was demanding for her daughter, demanding for me. And I was looking at her, but she didn't know that I saw her. And the people that had me, they were like, "No, her grandmother says she's gonna stay here for right now until they find out what they were gonna do with me."
Okay. And then after that, when was the next time that you saw your mother?
I saw her when I was 16, and I hated her.
So it was a long time later that you saw her.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know where she had been during that time?
I don't know where she was, but I was in a juvenile program. And was trying to like make her way back in, and I was resistant. I was cursing at her, and I was angry.
Did she tell you anything that had happened that was important in that time period that you didn't see her?
She told me that I had another brother, Zachary.
Okay. Did she show you anything?
Picture.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense Q for identification purposes. May I approach?
You may.
Do you recognize that? And what is that?
Yeah. That's my baby brothers.
Is that the photo she showed you?
Yeah. Yes.
Judge, I'm asking that what's been marked as defense Q for identification be entered into evidence.
State, do you have any objection?
No, Your Honor.
What's been previously marked for identification as states Q will be, defense Q will be received as defense 6. I'm sorry.
Permission to publish?
You may.
Do you know where Zachary is living now?
Yeah.
Where is he living?
He's living in Virginia.
Okay, do you know who he lives with?
Yes.
Who is that?
He lives with Richard and Mike.
Okay, have you had any contact with Richard or Mike?
Yeah.
Do you know when you started having contact with them?
Probably like within the last maybe like 2-3 months maybe.
Okay. And does Richard help you in any way?
Recently he has.
What does he do?
He helped he sent me some food.
Okay. While you were in the jail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Danielle, do you love your brother? Nikolas?
I do. I do. Mm.
Thank you, ma'am.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Woodard.
Good afternoon, sir.
Is this the first time you're actually in the same room with Nikolas Cruz?
This is the second time.
What?
This is the second time.
Oh, the first time was when he was born?
Yeah.
Okay. And when he was born in September of 1998, you were almost 12 years old, correct?
Yes, sir.
Your date of birth is what?
October 7th,
What year?
1986.
Okay. So approximately 2 weeks later, you turned 12 after his birth, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at the time of the birth, where were you living?
With Brenda in the efficiency.
And it was somewhere in this neighborhood where the courthouse is?
Right by Short Tail Charlie's.
Short Tail Charlie's.
Short Tail Charlie's.
Okay. And was anyone else living there?
My grandma.
Okay. And you kept referring to Brenda Woodard as Brenda. Is that what you would call her?
Brenda.
You called her that even when you were young?
Yeah.
Okay. And Dorothy Mayer, is that how she pronounced her name? Dorothy Mayer?
Dorothy, yeah. Yes, sir.
And so I was having a little trouble hearing you. Your voice was a little low. So you said she's your grandmother?
Yes, that's my grandmother. That's our grandmother.
And that's not Brenda's mother, though, was it?
Yes,
Was it her mother or stepmother?
that was her mother.
Her mother? Okay. And where did Dorothy Mayer usually live?
She lived in the Gables, and we had our own place in Hallandale, but Hurricane Andrew blew it away.
Okay. So I think that might have been 30 years ago today, Hurricane Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay. At least that's what the paper said. So you went to school in Miami a lot of your childhood, didn't you?
Yes.
And where were those schools?
I went to, in Dade or Broward?
Dade.
In Dade, I went to Henry M. Flagler Elementary. I went to,
What grades were you there?
I was there from 2nd to 5th.
And were you living with Grandma Dorothy at the time?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
And your mother wasn't living there?
No, she
Okay.
was not allowed there. Only to pick me up and leave.
Okay. And so you were in elementary school in Miami, and then you started middle school in Miami, didn't you?
Yes.
What middle school was that?
I went to Kinlock, and I went to other middle schools as well.
Okay. And when you were in middle school, 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade? Mm-hmm. Is that a yes?
6th and 7th, I was there. Yes.
And 8th grade, where were you?
I was, I think I ran away or I got in trouble. I don't remember.
Okay. And when did you go into foster care?
I went into foster care when I was 12, and then my grandmother died, and Jody was still alive, and Jody felt bad because I was in foster care, so she let me come back.
And who was Jody?
Jody was my grandma's best friend. She was like my aunt, but
Okay. Was that an elderly person, Jody?
yes.
How old was she?
She was older.
Okay. Like 70s, 80s, or?
No, like 60s.
Okay. All right. So the reason you went to foster care is because you were running away from home, right?
No, I went to foster care because my grandmother couldn't take care of me. And Jody, at that moment, she didn't want me at the house. I was a little out of control. I had a lot of anger problems, a lot of problems.
You had a lot of, you were getting in trouble with the police too, weren't you?
So, yeah, I was. And I went to the bridge and I ran away from the bridge.
And the bridge is is that a drug treatment center?
The bridge is a place for children that have nowhere to, teenage children, like a shelter that have nowhere to go.
And you were at the village too?
The village, yes.
That's another treatment shelter for young girls?
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you in the foster care system?
I was in the foster care system since I was 12.
Until you were 18?
Yeah.
Okay. So, when you were 12, is that when you began using about 12 alcohol and other drugs?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. You were asked before if you'd gone to prison. How many times have you gone to prison?
I've been to prison twice.
Okay, and you're in custody now in it's like the Dade County Jail for Women?
Yes.
Okay, and are you pending new charges?
Yes.
Okay. In your childhood, would it be accurate to say that you were exposed to drug abuse by your mother, Brenda Woodard?
Yes, sir.
And did she expose you to stealing?
Yes, sir.
Did she expose you to crack addiction?
Yes, sir.
Or crack addicts, I should say.
Yes, sir.
Did she expose you to prostitution?
Yes.
And you hated her as a child, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And your mom wasn't the type of mom who was going to school like meetings where they discussed problems you were having, did she?
She showed up one time to my school with a hard hat and embarrassed me.
Okay. Was your grandmother coming to the school when you were having problems?
My grandmother, yes.
Okay, but not your mother, right?
No.
Your mom was not a stay-at-home mom waiting for you to come home from school, was she?
Some days she'd wait for me to come home from school.
But mostly she was working the street?
Yeah. Yes.
And your mom was stealing?
Yes.
And your mom was prostituting?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
I'm sorry to talk about these things. Your mom wasn't taking you to a psychiatrist, was she?
No.
She wasn't picking up any prescriptions that you might need?
No.
And your mom never helped you get a job, did she?
No.
You weren't living in a 4,500 square foot house on 2 acres with a pool, jacuzzi, and a basketball court, were you?
It was a dream, but no.
That would be a dream for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And you weren't having therapists coming to your house several times a week to try and help you?
I do remember seeing therapists quite often. Numerous times.
Would you go to them or at the school?
I went to them.
Okay. You were not going to summer camps, were you?
Yes, I've been to summer camp.
Yeah, which one?
Red Berry's Baseball World.
Okay. And no rich couple paid your mother money to adopt you and give you unconditional love, did they?
Paid my mother, you mean?
To adopt you.
No.
In fact, that would have been a great thing if it happened to you, wouldn't it?
I would have thought that back then.
Well, you would have fought it if you were a kid, but not if you were a baby. You couldn't fight it, could you?
No, I said I would have thought that back then. What the question you just asked me?
Yes.
I said I would have thought that would have been a great thing.
Oh, okay. Even when you were an older child, you would have welcomed that.
My understanding that my Linda wanted to. Brenda told me this, that she wanted to take me, but my grandmother and me and my grandmother's bond was, we were too attached to each other, so it wouldn't have worked out.
Okay. But you wouldn't have mind living in a 4,500 square foot home on 2 acres in Parkland, right?
Right.
Okay. You mentioned on direct that you know a person named Richard Moore now, correct?
Yes.
And that's not someone you knew before, what'd you say, 2 or 3 months ago?
I've known about him, and
You've
I've
known-
spoken with him before.
Okay. But you didn't know him from your childhood, correct?
No.
And you're aware, I believe you said, Zachary Cruz, the defendant's brother, and you're also technically birth brother as well, correct? Is living with him in Virginia?
Yes.
Okay. And Richard Moore's in the courtroom today, isn't he?
I don't see him.
Weren't you saying hello to him before?
Yeah, I did earlier, but right now I don't see him.
You see him now? Or you don't see him now, but you saw him before? Mm-hmm. Okay. And you didn't know this Richard Moore person before this shooting happened with the defendant, did you?
Right.
You know him through Nikolas Cruz, correct?
Right, yes.
Okay. And did you learn that him and his spouse, Michael Donovan, picked up Zach after he was bonding out from the jail without ever having met him before and took him up to Virginia?
I heard.
Okay. He didn't know Zach Cruz before then either, right?
Richard?
Yes.
I don't think so, no.
Or Michael Donovan, his spouse. Okay. And Richard Moore does send you money, correct?
He has.
Okay. And have you met, did you get a new attorney today?
I don't know yet.
You don't know if you got a new attorney?
I don't know yet.
Okay. Do you know who Mark Lowry is?
Yes,
Who is he?
he's an attorney.
Okay. Do you know he's your attorney now?
Yeah, you just told me.
I told you?
I think so. That's what you just said, right?
Okay. All right. And he's in the courtroom now too, correct?
Yes.
And your old attorney is also here, correct?
Yes, he is.
Okay, and so Mr. Lowry replaced Mr. Rosenberg today, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you know that Mr. Lowry represented Zach Cruz in the past?
Yes.
And Mr. Moore arranged for Mr. Lowry to represent you, correct?
No.
No?
No.
Who did?
Zach.
Zach did,
Yes.
who's living with Richard Moore, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that Richard Moore and Michael Donovan produce a reality television series?
Beyond the scope. Over.
Are you aware that Richard Moore and Michael Donovan produce a reality TV show?
What does that have to do with anything, sir?
Ma'am, I'll decide whether or not it's relevant. If I don't say the objection is sustained or tell you not to answer, then you need to answer the question.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right.
Are you aware of that?
No.
Are you aware that one of the episodes of the show was called Being Zachary Cruz?
Overruled, you can answer.
That what?
Are you aware that Richard Moore and Michael Donovan have a show where they have an episode called Being Zachary Cruz as a
No.
part of a reality show? Are you aware of that?
No.
Do you think that it would be, well, let me strike that. Do you think it would be appropriate to capitalize on the murder of 14
Objection.
children and 3 staff members of
Objection, Your
MS?
Honor.
I would like to finish the question first.
I'm waiting to rule until you finish.
Do you think it would be appropriate to capitalize on the murders of 14 children and 3 staff members at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School by filming or creating a reality show based on being the brother of a mass murderer?
Okay, ma'am, don't answer the question. I'm sustaining the objection.
Judge, I'm moving to strike that.
Overruled.
Are you aware that Mr. Moore has sent thousands of dollars to Nikolas Cruz to his commissary this year alone?
Can I ask him a question?
If you don't understand the question, you can tell me you don't understand the question. That's fine.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Are you aware that Richard Moore has sent thousands of dollars this year alone to Nikolas Cruz commissary account?
I'm not aware, but how do you know it's only him? Zachary has his own money too.
That's his note.
Ma'am, just the attorney asked the question, you need to answer the question, okay? If you don't understand, you can say, I don't understand, or can you repeat it? But you can't just fire back your own questions, okay? Thank you.
Are you aware of that?
Yes, you just told me.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Woodard.
All right, sir.
Okay, anything else, Ms. Curtis? Is there anything
Yes.
else?
Just, yeah.
Before Nicholas was born and you were living in that apartment, did Brenda have to go somewhere just before, for a few weeks before Nicholas was born?
Objection, outside the scope.
Overruled. That means you can answer.
Okay. She had to go to a drug treatment program.
Okay, and you and your grandmother, did you stay in that apartment?
We stayed at the apartment.
Okay, and how did you get to the hospital when Nicholas was born?
My grandma.
Okay. When did you first find out that Nikolas Cruz, who is your brother, was the one who committed the shooting in Parkland?
I found out that was him when Kate came to see me in 2018. I was in prison. That's when I found out that was my baby brother.
Okay, and at that time, did you tell Kate a lot of the things that you testified here to today?
Objection.
Sustained.
Hearsay is admissible on a penalty phase.
Sustained.
Did you agree to testify about your mother and about what you saw her doing while she was pregnant before you ever met Richard Moore?
Yes.
And you told Mr. Marcus you have charges pending against you, right?
Yes.
And you're here anyway testifying on behalf of your brother?
Yes.
Okay. You were never an ESE student, a special education student, right?
No.
Were you ever told that you had a language disorder?
Objection, outside the scope.
Overruled.
They had to cut my tongue when I was little, underneath.
Okay, that was for speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Marcus asked you a bunch of questions about whether you would want to live in a 4,500 square foot home, right?
Yeah, he did.
And he asked you about whether you would want to have parents who took you to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
And he talked to you about whether you would want parents who went and got medication for you, right?
Yes.
Would you have wanted, while you were in your mother's womb, to have her drink Cisco wine every day?
No, ma'am.
Would you have wanted her to smoke crack every day?
No, ma'am.
Would you have wanted her to smoke cigarettes every day?
No.
Would you have wanted her to go to the doctor only 4 times?
No.
May I have a moment, Judge?
You may. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to take a brief recess so we can set up the next witness who's going to be testifying via Zoom. So we just need to set the equipment up. Please do not discuss the case. Please leave your notepads behind. Okay, the jury has been excused. As soon as they clear the hallway, the sheriff's office will bring the witness out. In the meantime, if you all can go ahead and set up your next witness. Okay.
Can we just have one moment just because
Sure, as long as it doesn't hold you on, if you're not ready.
As soon as they're in the jury, I'll be out.
Just 2 seconds.
Okay. witness via Zoom, Susan Lubar. Is that how you say your name, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I have a copy of the witness's driver's license here so that I can identify her and swear her in when the jury comes back and the jury is present. Ma'am, you're able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
And Ms. McNeill, do you want to do a test to make sure she can hear you?
Ms. Lubar, can you hear me? It's Melisa.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Ms. Lubar,
Yes.
watch me as I walk, okay?
Okay.
You see this gentleman right here that has a mask on?
Yes.
Do you recognize him?
I recognize him. It's just from seeing him on TV. I wouldn't know him from when I had him when he was 3.
Okay, but you can see him in the Zoom?
Yes, I can see him.
Okay, Nicholas, can you see Ms. Lubar on the screen in front of you?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Ms. Lubar, this is Jeff Marcus. I'm waving now. Can you see me?
Yeah. I can't hear you it's kind of low.
Okay, it's probably I'll speak up louder. I'm just going to ask you that if at any time during this presentation you cannot see the defendant, to let us know. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else before we bring in the jury?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Jurors are entering.
What is that?
Okay, the jurors are present. Everyone may be seated. Ms. Lubar, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. You can put your hand down, and for the record, I have identified the witness by her Florida driver's license. Ma'am, would you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Susan Hendler Lubar, Hendler, space Lubar.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McNeill, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Lubar. How are you?
Good.
Okay, thank you for being here. If at any time you can't hear me, please let the court know or raise your hand, and then we'll take care of that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, where are you currently residing?
In Pearland, Texas.
Okay, and how long have you been living there?
3 years.
Okay. Are you still a resident of Broward County, Florida?
Yes.
Okay. So you live with someone in Texas, but you still maintain a home here in Broward?
Correct.
Okay. Are you currently employed?
Yes, I take care of my grandson.
Okay. And before you started taking care of your grandson, were you working anywhere else?
Yes, Broward Children's Center.
Okay. And what is Broward Children's Center?
It's a multifaceted organization that takes care of children with medical needs from basically birth to age 22. They also have group homes. They also have a preschool. They also have ABA therapy. They do all kinds of speech, language, physical and occupational therapy.
And
They
what
do
was,
care.
and what was your role there at Broward Children's Center?
I was a administrative assistant to the ESE specialist, and then I was the administrative assistant to the CEO.
And prior to working at Broward Children's Center, were you employed by the Broward County School Board?
I was employed, prior to that, I was employed by Charter Schools USA as a ESE specialist
And Ms.
for 10
Lubar,
years.
I'm sorry, what is an ESE specialist?
It's it's the person that oversees all of the services for special education children and ensures compliance to the county's standards and the federal government standards for special education children.
So you just said two words, and I want to know if they mean the same thing now. You said ESE and special needs. Are they the same thing?
It's, yes, exceptional student education specialist is what my role was.
So if you're designated a special needs child or an ESE student, it means the same thing?
Yes.
Okay. And before the charter school, where did you work?
And then I worked for Broward County School Board
Okay.
at a couple of different schools there.
How many years?
Before that, I worked in Texas for like 8 years, and also in special ed.
How many years were you employed by the Broward County School Board?
From 2001 to 2007.
I'm not going to hold you to the exact dates. And you said you worked in Texas as well?
Yes.
And that was with the,
From 93 to 2001.
and what were you doing in Texas? Were you teaching there as well?
Yes, I worked early childhood, children with autism, specifically very severe children with autism, and some older kids right before I left.
Ms. Lubar, is it safe to say that your entire educational career you've been dealing with special needs children or ESE students,
Yes,
either in the classroom or in an administrative position?
correct.
Okay. Ms. Lubar, are you here because you want to be?
I'm here because I was subpoenaed.
Okay. So you're not here to help the defense, are you?
I'm only here to give factual information.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lubar. So what I'd like to talk about is the time that you work for the Broward County School Board, okay? And also a little bit about your education. Can you tell us about your education and what your primary focus was or your degree was in?
My degree was in age 3 to grade 12, exceptional student education.
And during your career, did you focus on a particular age group?
I focused mainly on 3 to 5 year olds.
And does that constitute early childhood?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were in Broward County from approximately 2001 to 2007, what were you doing here?
I taught the preschool program. I taught in an autism cluster program as well. And that's what I did at Park Trails and Riverglades and Maplewood.
Okay. So when you were doing early childhood at Riverglades, did you have any particular certifications or qualifications in order to have that position?
You have to be ESE certified to teach there.
And what does that mean, Ms. Lubar? What's required in order to be ESE certified?
You have to take coursework in early childhood.
Okay. And then as you continue in your career, do you have to do continuing education courses?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that a certification that you maintained the whole time you were in Broward?
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to talk to you about your time at Riverglades. You said you worked at a special preschool there.
I worked in the preschool program there in the regular school.
Okay, help me understand what that means. There's a cluster or there's a part of the school that's designated for a particular population aside from the regular mainstream school?
They have classrooms for children that are 3 to 5 year olds with exceptional student education needs.
Okay. And was the program that you were involved with, did it have an acronym or a particular name?
Place,
Do you remember what the acronym means?
preschool language acquisition or activity centered education.
Okay, close enough. How about you tell us what it was? What was the program? What was the purpose of the program?
The purpose of the program was to implement individualized education plans in order to support learning in any areas of deficit that the child would have had coming into the classroom.
Okay. So how would a student have an individual education plan, and that's also referred to as an IEP, is that right?
Correct.
How does that process start?
There are many different ways it could start. Referrals from different agencies, and then a psychological evaluation would have been done. And then from there would be recommendations for the education for educational needs of the child, and you would direct your teaching to support the positive growth of those deficits.
So is that a decision that one person makes, or is there like a committee that makes the decision as to what would be the appropriate placement and what services a particular student would need?
There would be a committee.
Okay. So the students that were at the PLACE program, would they all have gone through that process that you just discussed?
Yes.
And would all of those students have had an individual education plan?
Yes.
Okay. And all of the prerequisites, for lack of a better word, for the ESC designation, that was all done through the Broward County School Board?
I'm not really sure what you mean by prerequisites. I don't know what documents were collected prior to his initial evaluation, so I really can't say.
Okay, that's fine. But now if we're talking specifically about Nikolas, he would have come to you with an individual education plan.
Correct. He would have come into my classroom with a plan would have been developed at his initial meeting.
Okay. Would you have been part of that meeting, or would you just have received the data from the meeting and then implemented whatever services were necessary?
I would have not been part of that initial meeting.
Okay. So I'd like to talk to you about the PLACE program and what your classroom looked like. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a typical classroom would look like for your students?
So there would be it would be center-driven areas within the classroom to develop fine motor skills. There would be, it would be print-rich.
What does that mean?
There would be lots of words, labels, posters. There would be reading materials, picture books. There would be different centers like any other preschool that you would take your child to that didn't have an IEP, with block centers and dress up, and they would have circle time and music and individual areas for self-learning and self-correcting. It would have maybe soft cushions around and for reading areas.
Just like a regular preschool.
Just like any other preschool, you set it up pretty much the same way.
Okay. Now, in terms of the student to teacher ratio, what would that be on average in this center that you were teaching at, or a place?
Well, I'll speak specifically to the classroom that Nikolas was in.
If you remember, please.
Oh, I do. There were either between 12 to 14 children, 2 teachers. I was co-teaching with another teacher, and we had at least 2 aides, and we might have had a floater in and out. I don't really remember that, but I feel like we might have had somebody that came in and out. Also, the speech language pathologist would come in to the room and work with kids in the center. So it could have been 1 to 7.
Okay. And those aides, were those paraprofessionals?
Yes.
And how would you describe the paraprofessional? What would their role have been?
Their role would be to support the teacher, implement any goals that were that the children needed, take data on that would have been monitored by the teacher, to support children's learning.
So would that have been a classroom that would have had more teachers and more aides than, say, a mainstream kindergarten center?
Yes.
Okay. How about the structure of the classroom? Would you say that it was more structured than a mainstream preschool?
The structure of the classroom, I would say, would be like a typical preschool classroom. Within that, different children would have had may have had a more highly structured, monitored system within the classroom. It just would depend on what the child's needs were.
So each of the students in the classroom would have had their own individual education plan.
Correct.
So when you say it would depend on the structure, it would depend on what the needs are of the child and their IEP.
Right.
Does that sound accurate?
Right. The physical structure stayed the same, but each
Understood.
child, depending on their needs, may have had more support in one area or another.
Okay. Was this a behavioral placement?
No.
Okay. Were there students that had behavioral needs?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall teaching Nikolas Cruz?
Yes.
And do you recall that would have been around 2003, 2004?
Correct.
Did you finish that? I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Did you finish that school year there at Place?
No.
Just 1 second. Your Honor,
Yes,
I'd like to show the witness an exhibit,
okay.
and I don't know how you want to do it before it's published, because she's on Zoom.
I have no objection.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Ms. Lubar, I'm going to show you a picture of Nikolas Cruz, who was 4 years old at the time. I'm going to show it to you, and can you let us know if you recognize that photo? If you do, great. If you don't, not a big deal. And for the record, it's previously been marked for identification as 1F.
Can I approach? Yes, so is 1F
Yeah.
different than just F? Okay,
Yes.
no, sorry, hold on just a minute.
Okay.
So it'll go through the alphabet, then 1 and the alphabet, then 2.
Same way the state did it for their presentation.
Okay. And state you don't have an objection, is that what you
Okay.
indicated? Defense, 1 F as in Frank will be received as defense 7.
Is that published for you guys? Can you see it? Okay. Ms. Lubar, can you see the photograph that's on the screen, the Zoom screen?
Yes.
Do you recognize who this child is?
Yes.
Okay, who is this child?
Nikolas Cruz.
Okay. And this is how you remember him?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall what, could we take that down, please? It's not on here. Oh, Melissa, thank you. Do you remember what Nicholas's ESE eligibilities were back in 2003?
Developmental delay and language impairment.
Do you recall what it meant when a student had an eligibility of developmentally delayed? What that meant?
That means they would have had to have at least 2 areas of development that were not on age-appropriate level.
I'm going to test your memory, but do you remember what those areas of development were back in 2003, 2004?
Social, emotional, and language.
And how many different areas are there? Do you remember?
4. I believe 4.
Okay.
They are academic, social, emotional, independent functioning, and language.
And in order to be developmentally delayed, you have to have at least 2 of those designation or impairments in 2 of those domains?
Correct.
Okay. And is that a designation that could follow a student for the rest of their educational career?
No, developmentally delayed drops off when a child turns 6. Either they are reevaluated at some point, or the data proves that they have gained the ground they needed to be age appropriate, and then it just falls away and you don't need to have another evaluation. The language impairment is something that's reevaluated every 3 years or sooner if you feel the need for some reason to either, add more goals or to dismiss. And then that just stays with them until they gain the ground they need to be age appropriate.
Is one of the goals of the program, the PLACE program, is one of the purposes to give a child early intervention that may be having some deficits in some areas? Is that one of the goals? Okay. And going to the time that you had Nikolas in September of 2003, that's when the school year started, right? Or maybe the end of August?
It started in August. He was 3, and then he turned 4, like in the very beginning of September.
Okay. And can you describe what Nikolas was like at the beginning of the school year that you remember?
Nikolas had a lot of aggressive behaviors, and he had limited expressive language. He also had some fine motor problems, and
That covers it?
I'm sorry?
That covers it?
Yep.
Okay. So did you, you mentioned aggression, so that would fall under behaviors. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Not a behavioral center. PLACE is not a behavioral center, right?
Correct.
Did you find yourself spending a lot of time with Nikolas?
I did a lot of interventions to support him in restraining his aggressive behaviors, along with everything else that was on his IEP.
Okay. So let's talk about some of those interventions. Very early on, you noticed that something was different about Nikolas. And I don't want to put words into your mouth, so if that's not an accurate description, I want you to say, Melisa, that's not an accurate description.
That's an accurate description.
Okay. So based on the behaviors that you were seeing, first of all, describe what those initial behaviors were, please.
Nikolas would push children, would scratch at them, would topple over furniture. He would stay away from other children, and if they got too close to him, he would basically pounce. That's what a lot of his aggression looked like.
And you said he also had an expressive language issue. What does that mean? Is that unable to express his feelings, or help me understand what that means?
Initially, he didn't communicate at all verbally. And over time, he did. Probably half a year in, he was able to do a lot more expressive communication, but not initially.
So this is a student that would have been 3 and then very, very shortly thereafter turned 4, right?
Correct, like within 2 weeks of school or so.
So does a 4-year-old have a pretty robust vocabulary?
A typical 4-year-old would have a lot of language.
Okay.
Sentences, hundreds of words.
And Nikolas didn't have any of that at the first part of the school year. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And you've been teaching for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree that a behavior can be a form of communication?
Yes.
Okay. And children that are not able to communicate, how do they sometimes respond?
Depends on the child.
Well, how did Nikolas respond?
Okay. Nikolas would push children if they got too close to him. He would pace the classroom, avoiding interactions with children. He would push over furniture. I just said those things. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So did it also appear to you that Nikolas had limited social skills as well?
He did.
Okay. So when you started noticing this behavior, at that point, do you make a decision that maybe this isn't the most appropriate placement for Nikolas and you start documenting some of these behaviors?
Initially, I would have taken data on what I was seeing, describing what it looked like, very observable behaviors, and I would have then tried interventions that I thought, with my experience, would have promoted a more positive interaction. And if, in the case of Nikolas, when it wasn't proving effective, I would have at that point reached out to the program specialist, and she would have been in contact with a behavior specialist, which is what did happen. And they would have done observations and given me other strategies to use.
So you just said you start, I'm sorry, ma'am, you cut off?
No, to help support him.
Okay. So the first thing you do is collect data. Is this like a systematic process that you have that the school board has implemented?
There's, yes.
Okay. So that's what you... Mm-hmm. And you're collecting data. Did you identify any particular behaviors that you were concerned about, that you were trying to find an antecedent behavior or something?
Correct.
Okay, what were those 2 behaviors?
Well, Nicholas, I took data on two behaviors, which was aggression and which I've already described what that looked like, and animal fantasy behavior, which was something that I had not experienced. Those behaviors looked like curling his hands into paws, hissing, scratching out, scaling furniture. And so that was pretty unusual to see that. I did try a lot of things I already knew what to, because a lot of interventions are certain behaviors would require certain interventions and a lot of reinforcement and creating an avenue for Nikolas to be able to engage in those behaviors since they were preferred, where it wouldn't affect other children. And when these animal fantasy behaviors were not reducing and the aggression was continuing, that's when I would reach out. That's when I did reach out.
So before you reach out, you collect a lot of data, correct? And you did a frequency chart?
I did.
What is that?
Many things. I took anecdotal data, like scripting what was going on. I took ABC data, which would be antecedent behavior consequence data, which you look at the behavior, you try to find an antecedent to that behavior, and then what happens next is what they call the consequence. It's not like what most people would probably generally think a consequence is, but it's just the very next behavior that happens after. I took the frequency data. I also engaged the paraprofessionals, the other, to also take data on these different behaviors.
So you collect all this information, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal is to find out if there's something that sets him off, and then you try and work on whatever the behavior is, or whatever the issue is before the behavior? Is that one of the goals?
So the goal of taking the data collection is to see if you can find an antecedent, what's happening beforehand, so that you can put an intervention in place so that the behavior does not occur. And then from there, you would work on appropriate behaviors, replacement behaviors, to eliminate those negative behaviors.
And in Nicholas's case, you were focusing on aggression and the animal fantasies, correct?
Yeah.
And were you ever able to determine, you along with the paraprofessionals and the other support staff, what was the antecedent behavior that led to the aggression and led to the animal fantasy?
So they're two different behaviors. As for the aggression, and it was analyzed by a behavior analyst, program specialist, with some input from me, of course. Proximity to other children would cause the aggressive behaviors. If no one was near Nikolas, he wouldn't hurt them, push them, topple over anything to get to, anything like that. As far as what the antecedent was to this animal, tiger, pawing, hissing, climbing, hiding type behaviors, none of us could determine at that time what was causing that.
Do you think that his inability to communicate would have contributed to either the aggression or the animal-like behavior?
Objection, asking for speculation.
In your opinion, based on your training and experience as a special education teacher?
If she can answer based on her experience.
If you can answer, ma'am. The judge just said if you can answer.
I think that language lack of expressive language does contribute to negative behaviors.
Okay. And then you said that you reached out to some other individuals that helped you to develop some interventions. Is that correct?
Right, the program specialist at that time.
Okay. Can you tell us?
Probably the ESE specialist also that was there.
Because obviously your goal is to get Nikolas the services that he needs to be successful in school, right?
Correct.
And at this point, with his behavior and the animal-like behavior, his aggression, that wasn't happening, correct?
Can you repeat the question?
Let me simplify it. I apologize. Bad question. Do you think that Nikolas's aggression and animal fantasy behavior interfered with his education?
Yes.
Okay. So, can you tell us what some of the interventions were? And at this time, Judge, I'm going to be moving into evidence a portion of the educational records. Okay. Do you have those, Mr. Marcus?
Yes.
Those were also provided to Mrs. Rebar. It's a composite. It also has the certification of authenticity from the school board. Okay. It's previously been marked as, for identification purposes, as 1G.
Defense 1G for identification. State, do you have any objection?
Can you just announce for the record the S, the date stamp?
Yes.
Ms. McNeill?
So it's SBBC 75 through 1 SBBC 144 and SBBC 170 through SBBC 178. Is that what you have, Mr. Marcus?
Yeah, I don't mind if you explain to the jury what the.
Okay. So SBBC stands for School Board Broward County. And they bait stamped all of the records that both the state and the defense received in discovery from the school board. So you'll hear us referencing those numbers, and that means we're referring to a specific document. And we pulled out sections of his records. You will have access to all.
1G for identification will be received without objection as defense 8.
Ms. Lubar, do you have those records in front of you?
So I have data sheets that end in 75 and go through. I know you sent me a lot of things.
What was FedEx to you should be exactly what
I don't have it, not everything came, none of my data collection came in the FedEx. I did get another teacher's who had Nikolas. I got all of his home notes, which are not mine. And then I did get the, I got the, I think this is the prosecutor's, my, Joyce Mark, stenographer, I guess my statement to him.
Oh, the deposition.
The deposition. I got the psychological report that came after I already left.
Okay, so what I'll do is...
But I do have an email with my data collection, if that's something you're looking at.
So when you talk about data collection, is that the ABC documents and the frequency?
Yeah.
Okay.
The ABC, the frequency, and maybe some observations are.
Okay. So you just explained all of that to the jury, and that's been moved into evidence, so they'll be able to look at that. But what I'd like to show you is SBBC 93, and I'm also going to, I don't know if she can see that or if we need to do it from Zoom. They'll put the document up for you, Ms. Lubar, so that you don't have to dig through all the stuff I sent you. Okay. Ms. Lubar, can you see this document?
Yes.
What is this document?
This is an email sent by Lori Sugar, who was the behavior intervention specialist and a program specialist for preschool. And she was sending me, it's an email from her.
Okay. And what was the purpose, or what was Ms. Lori Sugar Alper's role in this particular case and in this
He
email?
was giving behavior suggestions for interventions.
Now, the suggestions that she made, were you already implementing these?
I was.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the recommendations she makes is creating a special area or a safe space. Do you remember that?
It was a, do you want me to explain what that was, or do I don't know what you're exactly.
Well, first of all, do you remember that intervention?
Yes.
Can you now tell us what that intervention is, please?
So I created a space in the classroom that Nikolas could go into to be able to act out his fantasy behaviors of being a tiger or a lion or some sort of wild cat, where he could just do that and look at animal books and have stuffed animals within there. It was a tablecloth or a blanket, I don't really remember what exactly, over a small round table. And then it would be used if he would do something, some sort of work, it would be used as a reinforcer, so he would be able to go in there. And then he needed a very high reinforcer to come out of that and to do some work, and then he could keep going back and forth, and that's basically how I was able to work with him at all in the classroom at that time.
Was that the area that he preferred to be in?
Yes.
Would he let other students come into that area?
No, and all the children knew that that was his space, and they didn't even try to go in there.
Okay. And had you ever done this for any other students?
No.
So the behaviors that you observed and the interventions that you did, you hadn't done these for any other children?
I had not.
Okay. And then do you also...
Just this specific intervention.
Okay. And did you also have conferences with Nikolas's parents, Linda and Roger Cruz?
So I don't remember that. However, I do have a document that shows I did have a parent conference with them.
Does that document refresh your recollection as to those conferences?
No.
Okay. If you were to look at those conferences, would you remember the content and what would have been discussed?
Only whatever would have been written down on there. I don't remember them at all. So.
Okay, so SBBC 131, please. They're going to pull up one of those conferences, Ms. Lubar, and if it refreshes your memory, fine. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Give us a second. And while that's being pulled up, do you remember Linda and Roger Cruz?
No.
Okay. And ultimately, collecting all of this information, this data, the teacher conferences, and the intervention, what was your goal?
the goal was to support Nikolas in being able to express himself in a positive way.
At the time,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
No,
Okay. At the time that Nikolas was at Place Center inside of Riverglades Elementary, did you believe that that was an appropriate placement to fulfill his needs?
no.
Okay. What type of a place, based on your experience and training as an ESE specialist and a teacher, what type of an environment did you believe would be best suited for him?
I thought he should be in a EBD cluster program, which is for emotional behavior disorder children.
And did Broward County have those for preschool students?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to pull up one of those conference forms, Ms. Lubar. If you remember it, take a look at it. Let me know if you do.
I mean, it's there. So
Okay.
this document is actually from the referral packet.
Okay. Is this your handwriting, ma'am?
That's my handwriting.
Okay, so it looks like there are two different conferences, right? Conference 2
Yeah, well,
is dated.
there's actually 3 conferences because I have another one.
Okay, and there is one, but there's 2 on this form, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the one that's dated November 17, 2003. Looks like both mom and dad would have been present?
Yes.
Okay. And the purpose of that conference, tell me if I'm wrong, was for you to explain the behavior you're observing and what the school is doing to try and reinforce positive behavior.
The purpose of this conference looks like that I'm discussing having a reevaluation by a school psychologist to see what other data we could find.
Okay. You also indicate in that November 17, 2003 conference that Nikolas worries a lot. Do you have any recollection of that, him worrying a lot?
No.
Okay. And then the December 3rd conference note, you're discussing his aggression and his animal fantasy behavior, correct?
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but whatever in positive reinforcement that you are trying to implement at school, it's also helpful if the same positive reinforcement is implemented at home, correct?
Right. So I discussed, as it says here, that how to use a token system in the home, because the parents noted that there was aggression in the home as well, and also the animal behaviors, and that they were going to attend classes for behavior.
Do you know if the parents ever attended parenting classes?
I don't have any idea.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk to you about the psychological evaluation that was done, and I know that it was done after you left Riverglades, but your input, you have information that was put into that document. Do you remember that, ma'am?
I'm looking, I have a copy of that. And I filled out I filled something out for that as well.
And that information was, you said something about a referral packet. What is a referral packet?
So when you are requesting a new psychological evaluation, there's a packet of information that has to be filled out by the teacher and the parents. And it's called a comprehensive problem solving rating form. That's one of the ones. You have to fill out those parent conferences. You have to add that in there. You have to put all your data together that you've collected. And that's what the referral packet is.
And did you in fact do all of that, Ms. Lubar?
Yes.
And would you have had access to the document that would have been done by Ms. Linda Cruz, that same social and developmental history in the parent information form, or would that have just been provided?
that form, the filled out form would have been turned into me or the ESE specialist. Either I gave it to her or the parent would have directly given that form to the ESE specialist, and then it would have just gone together with all of the other documents to so that the psychologist would have everything at her hands prior to doing the evaluation.
Do you remember if you reviewed the social and developmental history that Linda Cruz filled out?
I don't remember.
Okay. So let's talk about the information that you provided.
Okay.
You had to answer some questions about Nikolas's social skills. Is that correct?
If it says so, then I did that.
Okay. And just very briefly, when you're talking about social skills, explain to us what that means.
How a student interacts with adults and peers.
And do you remember what you said about Nikolas's social skills abilities?
I don't remember what I said in the document unless I read it.
You can look at it, ma'am. If you just want to tell us what you're looking at so the record can accurately reflect.
It would be 170.
Okay. And that's information that would have been inputted into the psychological evaluation, correct? From the data you collected.
Correct. And what do you want me to read it?
Well, you want to read it and then just summarize it. Basically, how were Nikolas's social skills as you observed them?
Rarely makes friends easily or cooperatively works with his peers. When redirected or reprimanded, he almost always overreacts. Thus, he needs excessive praise, reassurances, and encouragement. These are taken from a checklist.
Yep.
Okay.
And you want to tell us what page you have that at?
The checklists are on page 127. Let's see, 127, 128, 129. Those are the 3 pages of checklists.
Okay. So that's from the comprehensive problem solving and evaluation student rating form that you just referenced, correct? Yes, ma'am?
Yes, and then the psychologist puts it in a narrative.
Okay. So do you have the comprehensive problem solving document in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. So let's quickly just go through some of those areas. You don't have anything checked under academic skills on 126, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if any of those things would have applied, you would have checked them. Is that correct in terms of areas of concern? It's also on the screen, Ms. Lubar, if you want to look at it there.
I don't know. I can't answer as to why nothing's checked there.
Okay. But if you were, he's just turning 4, so would have these been applicable at that age?
Already 4. He turned 4 in September, and this was filled out in November.
Okay. So are we spelling, are we doing mathematical calculations when we're 4?
We could be doing some math. We do work on math concepts.
Okay.
We do work on sight vocabulary. But none of the rest of that.
Okay, and then under attendance, it looks like that was also not an area of concern for you, is that correct?
That's an area that I wouldn't have filled out.
Okay. And then if we go to 127.
Okay.
It's adaptive behaviors. Based on your training and experience as an educator and as an ESE specialist, could you tell us in general what adaptive behaviors covers?
It's going to cover all of these these areas that you're looking at, how he interacts with others, what type of attending he does, everything that you're looking at, that's considered an adaptive behavior, how you interact in your environment.
Okay, so here for the social skills and interpersonal relationships 1 through 7, you made a check either rarely or sometimes, correct? That's what you believed was applicable for Nikolas at that time?
Mm-hmm.
And then as we go down a little bit, more adaptive behaviors, which is productivity, efficiency, and organization. Is that also classified as executive functioning skills?
I can't answer that.
That's fair. So here you make indications as to whether or not he rarely engages, sometimes or often, under those 13 things, correct?
Correct.
And then the emotional adjustment on the next page, and this is under behaviors of concern. So is this an area, obviously based on the things that you've told us here, that would be most applicable for Nikolas at the time in 2003, 2004? Is that correct?
All of the information on here is applicable. Whatever I checked is how he behaved.
Okay.
Lost you. Hold on. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
I don't know what happened.
That's okay.
Okay.
When a child needs excessive praise, reassurance, or encouragement, does that mean anything in particular for you?
In the classroom setting, that would mean that in order for him to comply with classroom rules, do his work, he would need excessive praise, reassurance, and encouragement to do anything in the classroom.
Okay.
Excessive.
Okay. And you're saying here he avoids verbal communication sometimes and he's withdrawn sometimes?
It says he rarely avoids verbal communication was rare. Are we under emotional adjustment?
Yes.
Avoids other children sometimes.
So how was he with following directions? Do you remember, based on the data that you collected and you have in front of you and the psychological evaluation that has some indications of that?
Well, the psychological evaluation was done after I left, so I don't have any knowledge of that, how he was at that time, except for whatever I put in there as information that came from me.
Okay. And that's all I want you to focus on, Ms. Lubar, whatever the information that came from you, not from anybody else.
So, can you repeat the question?
So, was it difficult for Nikolas to follow instructions?
He could only follow instructions with excessive encouragement and reinforcement.
Okay. And was there any particular way that you would have to give Nikolas instructions? Would things have to be broken down in chunks? Would you have to repeat things a lot?
I don't recall.
Okay. And you also have experience in autism, is that correct? In
Yes.
Florida and in Texas.
Yeah.
Is that right? So obviously that must, well, not obviously, is that on your radar when you have some of these students? Are you looking for any of that behavior that may be an indication that an autism evaluation would be necessary?
I can't say that I would be looking for that behavior.
Okay. If you saw behavior that was consistent with what you know autism to be, would you do a referral?
Yes.
Okay. Were you concerned about that with Nikolas at all?
No.
But did you believe that there was something else going on with Nikolas and that we just didn't know what it was?
So sorry. Every time my phone rings, it interrupts the Zoom. I don't know what's going on.
That's
I'm sorry.
We're almost
Now
done.
I forgot the question.
That's okay. Was there any indication to you that there needed to be an autism referral for Nikolas?
And yes, I thought something else was going on with Nikolas.
Okay. And you talk a little bit in your records about he liked to hide a lot and had some escape behaviors.
Yeah, so escape behavior is not what people typically think, like trying to run away and escape out. What it is that you avoid doing, you do a different behavior to avoid doing what you're being required to do in the classroom. So he would do other things other than engage in what was being required of him.
So is that what you would call a preferred or a non-preferred activity?
No.
Okay. Help me understand what you meant then.
So escape behavior is not a preferred or a non-preferred activity. It's a behavior that you do to get out of doing something that you don't want to do.
Okay, is what you don't want to do a non-preferred activity?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. So if Nikolas didn't want to do what you were instructing him to do, then he would exhibit this behavior. Or I'm sorry, this escape behavior.
Sometimes.
Okay, would he participate sometimes as well?
It would just depend on how much reinforcement he would be given at the time of an activity. So for Nikolas, you would have to break up an activity into very, very small increments and give him a lot of reinforcers and then a lot of downtime in between, and then he would work.
So is it unusual for children that age to, let's say you're playing Play-Doh and that's a preferred activity, right? They want to do that, and then you want to teach a math concept. Not a preferred activity for some kids, would have been for me. Pulling them away, that's not unusual for children in general if they don't want to do what you want them to do, correct?
So most children would transition easily from one activity to the next because everything is exciting when you're 3 and 4 years old and you just want to do everything. And you would build into the classroom transition activities to move from one activity to the next. So children are aware that there's going to be a change. And that makes transitions more smooth. And so that's how you would do that. Would be typical for most children to be able to easily transition from one activity to the next.
So Nikolas didn't do very well with transitioning from one activity to the next?
No.
Okay. Based on your many years of experience in special education, back in the time that you had Nikolas as a student, what did you believe would be the best environment for him?
After taking all the data would prove to me that he needed to be in a highly structured behavioral center with a very low teacher-student ratio, like 1-to-2, something that's not provided in the place classroom.
Ms. Fubart, do you believe that you did everything that you could do to help Nikolas be successful?
Yes.
Okay. And when you left the PLACE program, you had set in motion and provided all the documentation that you could have provided the school board in order to facilitate perhaps a change of placement. Is that correct?
I did not fill out a change of placement packet. That's a whole different process. I did put together the data to look for a new eligibility, possibly a new eligibility in the area of behavior. And after that, I can't say what happened, but unless I look at, documents that are not really my information.
No, but that's okay. I'm just asking what, by the time you left, you had provided all the information that you could possibly do so that the school board could make the decision where the appropriate educational environment would be for Nikolas, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in your opinion, that wouldn't have been placed?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Lubar.
State?
I don't know where I'm looking. Okay, there you are. You're not in the witness box where I was expecting you. Hi, Ms. Lubar. You may remember me, Jeff Marcus. How are you?
Yes, hello.
Ms. Lubar, you were just asked, I think the last question, about what your opinion was regarding placement for Nikolas Cruz, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I want to ask you about the process of how decisions are made in the ESE environment at schools, okay?
Okay.
So there's a team that makes the decisions, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the team would have to gather data, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and there would be what's called an IEP meeting, Individual Educational Plan meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and there's certain people that the law requires to be at these individual education plan meetings, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and have you been to those IEP meetings?
Yes.
And were you one of the required people in the past when you were in Florida that you would help make the decisions regarding placements?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you involved at all in Nikolas Cruz?
Not in his initial placement, no. He already came with an IEP to my classroom.
Okay. And you were already gone, so you didn't get involved with the next year's IEP, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So there are sometimes disagreements regarding placement among the IEP members, correct?
From time to time, yes.
Okay. And they try to work out what's in the best interest of that child, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that applies all the way from 3 years old all the way up until they leave the school, leave the public school, correct?
22.
And up to 22 if they're still in the school, correct?
Right.
Okay. You were asked about autism, and you have an extensive background in autism with autistic children, correct?
Right, children with autism.
Can you tell us again what your experience is with autistic children?
I worked with children with autism from 1993 all the way through probably when I left Charter Schools USA. I had a couple of kids with autism in that school, so I think that was 2016 maybe. So I have a lot of training in it, and I had classrooms that were specifically created for children with severe autism all the way up to children that had Asperger's syndrome. And that's my experience.
And you told us that you didn't think, in your experience, that Nikolas Cruz was autistic. Can you tell us why you believe that?
I'm really not sure what the relevance of that is exactly. I mean, I didn't have any, when he came to me, that wasn't his eligibility, and I'm not really sure what the relevance of that is.
Ma'am, do me a favor, please. If you can answer the question, you can go ahead and answer. If you can't answer it, you can tell the attorney you can't answer it.
Okay, I can't answer that.
Okay. Do you remember in your previous statement to us giving us some of the reasons why you didn't think it was autism, why he was not autistic?
I mean, I could look back in the deposition. I don't know what page.
If you look at page 36, line 3.
Okay. And so you want me to read that?
Well, let me just ask you, did you think that his fantasy behaviors, the elaborateness of it, would not fit for you in your experience under autism?
Yes.
Okay. So that was one of the reasons that you thought that he was not autistic?
I thought that his fantasy behaviors did not fit into any, it's all individual. Every child acts differently, even in the field of autism. But I didn't see that behavior. I didn't see that as a behavior that would have made me feel that he had an autism.
Okay. Would you please put up page SBBC 80? Thank you. I'm going to show you a document. If you give us just a second. Ms. Sly, would you mind showing them the jury the SBBC number on the bottom, just so that they know what we're talking about, because I don't know that we showed it to you. So you can see on the bottom it says SBBC 80 or 00080. Okay, and if you could scroll up so we can see the document. Thank you. So, Ms. Lubar, this is one of the frequency recording data sheets for September 24th, 03, which was actually his birthday, correct?
I don't know when his birthday is, but if you say so, then it's his birthday.
Could you show the entire document? Well, I guess
I have it.
Okay. Well, I want the jury to see it. Thank you very much, Ms. Sly. Now, could you explain this to the jury, what you're documenting on this particular page?
Okay, so this observation was done by one of the paraprofessionals in the classroom. There would have been an accompanying document that would have labeled what the aggressive behaviors were that we were looking at. And then the time frame, this is the daily schedule under activity, and under each activity, how many times aggression was noted, and then you would put a tally mark down there.
Okay. Now, actually, I'd like to look at the areas where there are no notations, such as the work area, that there is no notations of aggression during the work time, lunch time. It looks like large group, snack, rest time, and end of day.
So this was just if it was noted. So the paraprofessional would not have been working solely or looking solely at Nikolas all day long to take data, because she would be doing other things. So I don't know if she was asked to just specifically look at certain times of the day. I don't know that.
Okay. So we can't say that he was very good at work time as opposed to circle time. It just may not have been being notated at that time.
Correct. Or, I mean, if I looked at other data sheets, I'd feel like, we might have said it's a large group. I really don't know. You're right. I don't know.
Okay.
This is just what happened then.
I'd like to show you one more page. Miss Slide, please, number 77. Okay, so on page 77, just from a general standpoint, there's less marks on such areas like at the circle time on 9/24, I think there was 10 marks, and here there's 2 marks, correct?
Correct.
Now, does this mean there's less aggressive incidents during circle time? Can you make that judgment or not?
No.
Okay. Were there times that Nikolas was in these activities in the proximity of children and not being aggressive?
Yes.
Okay. So it wasn't at all times he was aggressive, was it?
No.
And was he able to play or interact with children without being aggressive?
I don't recall.
Okay. And I know this is a very long time ago. It's almost 19 years ago, so I don't think anyone could fault you for that. And this also was when he was 4 or 5 years old, correct?
He was 4.
Okay. Well, I don't want to argue with you, but I think he was born in 98. So would that make him 5 if he was born in 98?
That would make him 5.
Okay. All right, Ms. Luba, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Is there anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You're excused. We're going to go ahead and end the Zoom session now, okay?
Thank you.
What are we doing?
We're done.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break at this time for the evening. We're going to start back. I ask that you please be here tomorrow morning at 9 so that we can get started around 9:15, 9:30. I know it takes a while to get everyone up here, and we are starting a bit later so that you all don't have to be here at 8:30. So please be here at 9 o'clock. Please do not discuss the case. Please remember that you may not permit anyone to say anything to you or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to say anything to you or in your presence, tell the person to stop and report the incident immediately. Do not conduct any investigation or read newspaper articles, watch television, or use a computer to get information about the case and the people and places involved. Remember, you may not have any discussions of any sort with any friends or family members about the case while we are in recess. Please leave your notepads behind. Have a safe drive, and I'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, the jurors have been excused. I know that there is the issue of the state's motion to redepose a witness that you all indicated needed to be heard tonight. So if anyone needs a short break before I hear argument on the state's motion, go ahead and do so. And as soon as you're back, I will hear argument on those issues. see A, B, C, D. Isn't that 4?
And then in paragraph 3, I mentioned exactly what you have.
Okay, go ahead, state.
Well, as the court is aware, the defense has decided not to use the neuroimaging tools, specifically the QEEG, the DTI, the MIMNEuro, and the NeuroQuant. That will substantially change the opinions of Dr. Adler, as he has relied on all 4 of those things in his previous opinion. With respect to Dr. Paul Connor, his deposition was taken on March 4th, 2022. Since then, this was again Friday night. The state received an email in which Dr. Connor has now reviewed several more documents, including the PET report, which is also no longer being used in conjunction with the MIMNEuro, additional doctor reports, Dr. Combs' deposition, Dr. Gajani's deposition, and other additional material provided by Dr. Gilmet. I think the state is allowed to redepose Dr. Connor on those limited areas as to how his opinion will change, if it will change. Also, the FSD comparison defendant chart, also conceded by the defense, that will not be used in Dr. Paul Connor's PowerPoint. How the removal of that chart will also change his opinion. Basically the same arguments for Dr. Susan Scully, whose depositions were taken on February 23rd, 2022, March 9th, 2022. Dr. Kenneth Jones was taken on March 29th, 2022, and Dr. Heather Bones, which was taken on March 2nd and March 16th of this year. So we're asking to set those depositions the week of September 5th, when we're not going to be in session, to explore how those opinions have changed, and then after that, we expect that those witnesses could be called by the defense the following week when we resume.
Who's going to be arguing for the defense?
I am.
Okay.
So, Judge, this is exactly why we filed that motion to continue when we were given information that Dr. Natalie Novick-Brown would be unable to continue working on this case. That's when we had asked for that was D-304, where we asked for a 45-day continuance between the state's case and the beginning of our presentation. Because of Dr. Natalie Novick-Brown being unable to continue working on the case and being able to testify at trial, we had explained to the court in the motion that basically it was possible that our other experts would have to expand their roles and take on some of what Dr. Natalie Novick-Brown was doing, and that we would also probably have to hire, or would be hiring, a new expert to complete our mitigation presentation. The state objected to that. Your Honor did deny that request.
No, I didn't. I just didn't give you 45 days. I gave you days, but not 45 days.
Right, and some of those days could have been used to redepose these witnesses. They knew that it was possible. We gave them a heads up, phone call, we put it in the motion, that they would have to be more than likely redeposed based on this reconfiguration of our presentation. And they chose not to use that time to do that.
Okay, but the remedy, when I say I'm not giving you an additional 45 days, you can't then file something the day before, the business day before you're supposed to be putting on the testimony, so that then the other side can't be ready, so then effectively you're asking for the continuance and then doing something that requires me to give it when I've already said no.
So up until the time that we gave that information over to the state, we were still speaking with the experts, reconfiguring who was going to take on what role. We provided that information to the state as soon as it was available and ready for them to have. So, and I mean, further, you know, as it pertains to some of the specific experts in their motion, Dr. Jones was given limited additional information. One was the PET scan, where in his deposition that's already been taken, he stated he would not be relying on any neuroimaging at all.
So Dr. Jones, what is the new information? I'm going to do this one at a time. What's the new information that you believe was just handed over about Dr. Jones that you need to ask him about?
It was just Ms. Basham was correct. It was just regarding the PET scan.
Which
Again-
I thought she just said he's not testifying to that.
Well, I don't know if his deposition, he meant he wasn't testifying to the MIM neuro or the PET scan
Okay,
or
well, can we
both.
ask the other side that before we bring it to my attention? Are you gonna ask him about that?
Or who has Dr.
No,
Jones?
ma'am.
No.
Okay, so your motion to redepose Dr. Jones is denied.
Okay.
What else?
As it pertains to Dr. Holmes and Dr. Scully, as Ms. Chiapponi's already said, they have been deposed twice before. Again, any additional information that was provided is because of Dr. Novick Brown's inability to continue working.
What's the additional information that was provided on those two doctors?
So for Dr. Holmes, it was a firearm log, social media logs, a voicemail from Mr. Cruz to I'll just say AG, some depositions, search history of Linda Cruz, Dr. Denny, Dr. Scott's evaluations, which are state retained experts, Brenda Woodard's arrest reports, statements given by Mary Hamill Thiel, Paul Gold, and like a bunch of depositions, Judge, of lay witnesses.
That
and
were
other
not given to this witness previously.
Correct, because her role, again, has expanded because of Dr. Natalie Novick Brown not being able to testify or work on this case because of her medical condition.
Well, Judge, and according to the defense, this information was provided to, the last piece of information was provided to Dr. Scully on August 7th. So why are we getting a notice about what was given to her on the 14th, or excuse me, on the 19th of September, or August? I mean, this was known to them, that they gave her this information, and yet we weren't told about it. And we had 2 weeks, we could have gotten this done.
Which of the doctors are not going to testify to anything new? If any, besides Dr. Kenneth Jones?
One moment, Judge. Okay. So, Judge, the remaining out of those 4 experts are going to be testifying to information that they had not testified previously to, however, was testified by Dr. Natalie Novick Brown in her deposition.
But the areas were not asked about in deposition by the state because they didn't know that these experts were going to be called for specific purposes. Is that correct?
I'm assuming that is their argument, Your Honor.
Yes, Judge, the last depositions, these were all in March and February of this year. We have not been given any new information that any of these witnesses were provided additional information, and especially now that none of the neuroimaging evidence is going to be used, it's even more critical.
How many approximately additional questions do you feel that you need to ask these 4 experts?
I would try to say we could do each one within an hour and a half. If we're given if we are told in advance that, even though we gave them this document, they're not going to be using it, and it's very streamlined, then that amount of time could certainly be decreased. But at this point, I don't know that, so everything that's been provided will be asked of them.
And when were you planning on calling these witnesses? I'm assuming this week, you're going to say.
Judge, I'm going to tell you that some of these witnesses will be more than likely testifying prior to the week of September 5th.
Well, they're not going to be if they can't be redeposed on new information that was just provided. So who exactly were you planning to call before the first week of September?
It was just for Connor and Jones, but she's already signed a motion for Jones, so Connor is going to have to do it. Can we do it tomorrow?
Okay.
Because he's on his way here.
But it wouldn't just be. I'm sorry, Judge. Give me a moment so I can look at the.
Yeah.
It's not. It looks like it would be Dr. Connor, and, I mean, Judge, you've said that Dr. Jones, you're going to deny the motions. He would be one of those people. And Dr. Scully, and both Connor and Scully should be quick for them to depose. And we would request a deposition of Dr. Connor tomorrow evening after court then.
Your Honor, that's, I'm going to be handling that, and that's just not enough time. First of all, he just gave us Friday afternoon, around almost 5 o'clock, a new PowerPoint, and all the other things that he has reviewed. Yeah, I can't understand the defense. They're always saying, hey, the state's giving this stuff late and we can't be prepared. I mean, Friday afternoon, a new PowerPoint and all this new stuff. I mean, it's just unreasonable. And she says he can do it tomorrow after work. I mean, it's like we're just doing nothing all day. Sure, we'll go take a deposition.
Dr. Connor, many of the slides in Dr. Connor's PowerPoint presentation are direct slides from that Dr. Natalie Novak-Brown, which the state is in possession of and has been in possession of.
But they don't know what that expert's going to say about those slides.
No, I understand that, but I'm not understanding why there needs to be a long amount of prep time is what I'm saying.
Well, you know, I'm not going to comment about that. But in any event, so we have a half day on Thursday and a full day on Friday. So can you be ready to take the depositions on one of those days?
This week?
Yes.
Judge, Friday we have a state retained expert for an all-day deposition starting at 11 a.m.
They don't have to take his deposition. They've already known about him for 4 years. I mean, that's the same thing they're saying. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, we scheduled it for a day we weren't in session, Judge.
But you see essentially the way this looks, right? It looks like you didn't get the amount of time that you asked for, so therefore you listed things at the very last minute to force this court's hand to have to give you what you initially asked for, and I denied. And that's been a continuous thing. I mean, that's the way it looks from where I'm sitting. So why is it not that? Why should I not think that?
It's that because that's just not the case. As I said, we were working with the other experts.
We had the entire week off. You all withdrew your motion for the subject to the Daubert hearing. I understand you did it on Sunday, but you withdrew that evidence, understanding that my assistant doesn't work on the weekends. I don't expect her to check her email until Monday morning. We found out I had the entire week set aside for that hearing. So why couldn't those things have been accomplished during that week? That was a whole nother week that we had off.
That's what we were doing, was working and talking to experts, talking to our witnesses. We've all been working nonstop, Judge. Weekends, nights. I'm sure the state's been doing the same.
Well, you need to make Dr. Connor, Dr. Scully, Dr. Holmes, and Dr. Adler available for deposition on Thursday afternoon and or Friday of this week, where I'm going to permit the state to redepose for the limited purpose of asking questions that they have not had the opportunity to ask. I'm not delaying this case. We're going full day tomorrow, full day Wednesday, half day Thursday as planned, and we're going to pick up next week. So,
Judge, I have argument for Dr. Adler that I have not yet got to make. Dr. Adler has not done any work since his last deposition. He has not been provided any other materials. It's not, you know, if the state decided to spend, and he's been deposed 3 different times, if they decided to spend their depositions focusing on neuroimaging, that's not our fault.
So there's nothing new that Dr. Adler has received from the defense recently subsequent to the deposition?
That's correct, Judge.
Right, State, why should I let you redepose this witness?
Judge, Dr. Adler's whole opinion in this case was about convergent validity. And so how his opinion is going to change, because he does not have that convergent validity, y'all, is going to be extraordinary. I don't know how he's going to be able to make the findings that he has made, and which extends to the issues that were in the PowerPoint of Dr. Connor, without his convergent validity. I mean, I don't know what there is left to say, quite frankly. So without these neuroimaging tools, it is paramount that the state explore what it is his opinion is going to be.
But they were privy to all that other information and decided not to ask those questions.
In what world would we be able to say, Dr. Adler, if all this stuff goes away, what's your opinion going to be? I mean, why would we ask that question? So that's why I want to know now what his opinion is going to be, absent all of this evidence going away.
And at the time, Judge, there was a pending objection to all this neuroimaging. They should have known to ask these other questions. They should have been prepared to do that, knowing that it was a possibility that Your Honor would have denied allowing the neuroimaging tools.
All right, I've made my ruling on Dr. Kenneth Jones, Dr. Paul Connor, Dr. Susan Scully, and Dr. Heather Holmes. I'll let you know about Dr. Richard Adler. All right, we're in recess.
Yeah. Well, I
There's
don't,
one other motion, Judge.
well, there's a couple other things.
Go ahead, what other motion is there?
The SF 215, Judge.
Your Honor, if I may.
Sure.
Just quickly. If Dr. Connor's deposition is going to be later this week, I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, but I'm not sure we have to do this now because it might change subsequent to his deposition.
Well, if he's going to provide a new PowerPoint, he would need to do that right before the deposition.
Oh, no, if anything, it'll just be things taken away from the current one. I was just saying, we don't necessarily have to do it now because his deposition is going to be later this week. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to take it.
I mean, we can table it until the deposition comes.
All right, so I'll defer ruling on that issue as well. I'll see you all tomorrow at 9
Your Honor,
a.m.
can we have an idea who's going to testify tomorrow?
Judge, just 1 second. We still don't need an order on Ms. Brown's perpetuation.
I know.
Okay,
I'm working on it.
okay.
I don't know. Are you guys who are you calling tomorrow if you so choose to disclose that information?
We were going to try to play Ms. Brown's testimony. I don't say that to put any more pressure on Your Honor.
No, it's fine. I have the testimony and I have it blacked out, the parts that need to be redacted. But I haven't put it into a written order other than I can just give both sides a photocopy of the redacted transcript, most of which was agreed to. Although you all were going to get back to me, the state was going to get back to me about the portions of the transcript that relate to an issue that's no longer being presented.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was going to get back to the court. I did get back to the defense that we weren't going to admit that.
So by agreement, those particular pages will be redacted?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so let me just have somebody make a photocopy of the rest of the testimony, and then I'll give it to both sides.
Thank you.